partie du continent africain. Et ce barrage-là représente au moins 13%. 13%. Et actuellement, on a 100 000 mégawatts. Voilà en condensé ce que nous sommes échangés et que je tiens à rapporter en présence de monsieur, son Excellence, monsieur le secrétaire exécutif, qui a demandé qu'il puisse échanger avec les États. Et à cela, je dis, nous avons dit et nous vous remercions de votre aimable attention. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to thank our brother from DRC, and I just say I like what you said. There are three things which are very, very important, and sometimes we need to focus on the comparative advantage of the natural resources in each of the countries. And three of the things that you mentioned are very important. The timber, the inga, I would add the minerals, which is very, very important. When I started my job, I found there was this study by Bloomberg and ECA and others on the mineral value chain for the manufacturing of electric vehicles and also the batteries. And the study is very interesting if you look at how the natural resources being on the Congo, the DRC, and also cutting across in Zambia. And we are happy that the two presidents signed an MOU on how to have that kind of joint industrial park or special economic zone, if I may call it that way. And recently, we also got a letter that DRC has also availed the land where that project is going to take place. Just for your own understanding, the estimations are that if we do it properly, by 2050, it will be generating 46 trillion, right from electric vehicles and also from the batteries, something that is needed now that would have a very serious impact on climate. Because this time we are not polluting the climate with the fuel that we normally use in our own vehicles. This is very, very, very important. And that project is going to be, that's what we are following up to make sure that now that everything is done, how do we take it forward to the implementation and bring the private sector? And that's the method we are using really for de-risking to make sure that we take it up to the end. The other project that you mentioned of timber forest, and when we are talking about carbon, that's what we are talking about exactly. But how do we do it properly? To be honest, we have not studied now the forest in DRC, which is a very big natural resource for the country. Not only in DRC, but also the whole of Central Africa also has, if you take Gabon, if you take so many other countries, they have that one as a natural resource. And it's our job to assist these member countries to make sure they can get the maximum benefit of those natural resources without necessarily impacting on the climate. The other issue is also the energy. Everybody knows the Inga Dam, Inga 1, Inga 2, and sometimes what has discouraged many people is that it is too big, which solves the problem, but also requires a whole huge amount of money. And everybody wants to go in, but I think for us to be able to address that problem, we need to go in as partners. We need to work together with all the partners and see how to solve it. We have already been discussing it with ADB. I know that my brother, President Adesina, we've talked about it many times. And there are many others who would also be interested. I think it is high time that we came together to discuss further about this and agree on a roadmap on how to make sure that this project supports not only the DRC, but the whole entire continent, where possible, so that we can have a starting point rather than just fearing because it is too expensive. We cannot do everything at the same time, but the points you are raising is that once we take on these kind of big projects, they have maximum benefit to the citizens, and also in terms of addressing the poverty, creating jobs, and also contributing to economic growth. So the point you raised is very, very important, and that's how that should be our approach in terms of addressing issues, not just picking small things and then be able to talk about them. We need to take on also the big things like this one, forestry that you mentioned, and also the energy and the minerals. And that's why we intend to have various value chains, including the diamond in Southern Africa, and also dealing with exactly the project in DRC together with Zambia. So I just want to stop here, but the point you are making is simple, is how can you help us in terms of really addressing these big things, which we very much appreciate, and which is also our responsibility to make sure that we help member countries. Thank you.
Honorable Minister, you wanted to contribute something?
Thank you very much. The colleague from DRC just took me a bit around the whole issue of investing in renewable energy, because the Inga Dam is indeed a renewable energy project, being hydropower. In fact, really, Gatete is correct that it has to be a regional continental project, and that's exactly what he said. Because I recall when we made a bit of progress on Inga Dam, it was only after an MOU had been signed for a potential offtake agreement with South Africa. Because what we had to identify was a country which has got a large country, a large economy with a power deficit, and South Africa getting involved as a potential offtaker. That made the Inga Dam a more viable project, which makes it then easier to finance. So it clearly is a regional and a continental endeavor. As Gareth has said, the other issue was one on the issue about transmission, that once you produce the power, can we invest in the transmission infrastructure into the rest of Africa? I think what we found was that you could connect easily into the SADC power pool, because we already have got existing transmission infrastructure, maybe also into the East Africa, but it was not so easy connecting into the other power pools so as to support the whole continent. So it's something that we've discussed in detail in other fora with the ECA and the African Development Bank. But on the subject of renewable energy, colleagues, I think that maybe we also need to share experiences. We're finding that if you want to really drive investment into renewable energy from the private sector, you need a minimum of three things. You need to make sure that you have got an economic tariff. So investors in the solar space, for example, need a tariff of about 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So if we're able to provide that in our respective countries, we know we are somewhere in terms of an economic tariff. Number two, we need to be able to provide government guarantees on the power purchase agreements, so that if our utilities cannot pay for the electricity, we, the government, can step up through our treasury ministries to buy that, but to pay for that power. Investors will find it easier if that were the case. Of course, we could use other structures. It might be a government guarantee. It could be some other form of guarantee from someone else if you're able to pull it off, but it is necessary to drive the investment into the solar space. Finally, we also need to have give the investors assurance that they can access hard currency to service their loans for investments into our country, some kind of currency access, currency convertibility agreement. So we need these three pillars to form the basis of what we call a government implementation agreement to drive investment by these independent power producers into the renewable energy space, which will cover solar investment, hydro, geothermal, as well as wind investment into the wind power projects. I thought I should share these with you. As Zimbabwe, we're very happy to share our government implementation agreement with any member country. We'll use the UNECA platform to do that. You are all free to see what we have tried to construct. It's a best practice GIA that we've come up with. We used capacity from the African Legal Support Facility, which is linked to the AFDB. We've got best practice on this. I thought I should share this with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Can we have Suleiman, if we are ready?
Yes, Your Excellency Chairperson. Thank you very much, Your Excellency Chairperson. I think it is very relevant. Just you choose it that the time we have in making the Executive Secretary to understand the expectations of member states. Just, Your Excellency, Chairperson, I wanted to say that we bear witness in what you have said, is that I know him for a long time and we feel that we are in safe hands. It's very true. Just while I was accompanying the head of delegation as he pays a courtesy visit to him, we really got impressed in a number of issues in the way that Your Excellency Chairperson, instead of following a line of one size fit all and choosing to understand country-specific contexts, needs, necessities, and priorities of member states is something which is impressive and very relevant and practical. That is a very good engagement. And Your Excellency also, most of the time, a number of engagements also gets frustrated by a bureaucratic hassle. But what we have seen from him, just simplifying things and just avoiding such kind of bureaucratic hassle and being a pragmatic and holding a view of get it done or not is something which is very good. And we really wish him a best of luck in his in his tenure. And we look forward as a delegation, as a request delegation, to work closely with him, Your Excellency Chairperson. Just in addition to that, as a sort of a compliment, and Your Excellency Chairperson, if you can also, through you, if we can request the Secretariat to, if they can share all the PowerPoint presentations, which is very pertinent and relevant in the documentation section, in the online documentation section, so that we can benefit and also happily inform the headquarters with the relevant line ministries, Your Excellency Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Solomon. Well, I think on the sharing of the PowerPoint presentations and all the papers, some of them are in the files, but I think we have, I hope everyone is through registration, the details of their contact details, so we can share quickly. That won't be a problem. But thank you so much. We have Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Chair, and allow me to also congratulate the Executive Secretary, Dr. Gatete, for his appointment. I would like to make 2 points, if you allow. The first point is to emphasize on the point that was made by my sister from Ghana, and also what the Executive Secretary has mentioned in his remarks, which is related to how practical do we make the deliberations that we are having here. And one of the suggestion, which is, let's see at different themes, yes, but I don't think the themes that were discussed and proposed for the next years are contradictory with what we've discussed during this year in terms of climate finance. I think we can put together this theme and make sure that we are able to address climate-related issues, but at the same time, issues related to agriculture, issues related to trade, they are not contradictory. The second point I would like to make, which is basically coming back to the point that I made during the discussion we've had here, we've gone through a number of different options in terms of accessing climate finance. Options that I believe are not affordable for most of our country. Yes, we have the green bonds, we have the different type of financing, but this financing are costly. And most of the countries are already facing very high debt levels. So one of the suggestions that we discussed was, how do we, first of all, try to create some fiscal space? When we go into, and I believe, Mr. Executive Secretary, you, as my former Minister of Finance, you will understand what I mean when I say, can we go into the details of how we spend the money that we receive? And the suggestion is, if you have to address climate issues, let's start by the subsidies that we give into non-climate friendly projects and sectors. We need to see how ECA can support countries into looking at these issues at the different cycles of PFM, of public finance management, and try to make saving at that level before we actually go for more costly source of funding. So that was one of the suggestions, and we would like to see more being done by the ECA on that side, so that countries can actually try to leverage on existing resources that they have, in terms of domestic resource mobilization, in terms of prioritizing our spending, in terms of knowing where we put every dollar or every money that we spend. So I thought I would also bring that issue to you, Mr. Executive Secretary, so that we really try to see, as we move along, how can we really make sure that these practical issues, we are able to come back to them next time that we meet. We try to see where do we stand in terms of those suggestions that we are making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rwanda. Yes, if you can respond whilst we wait for others to join in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella, for your good intervention. Unfortunately, I wish I had more time because I have another meeting that I have to attend. But let me just tell you two things so that this is not a meeting where you can give an answer straight away. But in New York, I was co-facilitating financing for development. And when we were looking at the debt levels of many countries, we are trying to make our colleagues, other countries, also understand what Africa is facing. I gave them an example that most countries here, there are some countries who are now, the payment of the debt is almost equivalent to the recurrent expenditure, or to the spending in health or education, whatever it is, depending on which country. And what does that mean? For the ministers of finance or ministries of finance who are here, the representatives, they understand that you don't pay the debt in local currency. You pay it in foreign currency, meaning you have to draw down on your reserves. And once you draw down on your reserves, you are reducing the capacity of the central bank to intervene on the market, meaning that for all the imports by the private sector who are buying things from outside, they are competing for the limited dollars or limited euros in the commercial banks. So the exchange rate impact becomes high, which feeds into the inflation. I gave them in some countries where you do a budget in local currencies, and then you contract the private sector. And halfway there, the private sector will come back and they say, I cannot implement unless you revise the agreement because of the foreign exchange where it has become costly and you are the one in charge of the macroeconomic management. So the impact is so big for countries which are highly indebted. And this is happening at the time when actually there has been so many problems almost accumulating. Most of our countries which are developing, you are poorly rated, you are reliant on actually concessional resources that come from the World Bank, from the African Development Bank, from other sources, whether it is Exim banks or Arab funds. That's where the money comes from that is concessional. And because our countries have been growing our economies, the sources of money has been shrinking. It's not enough. That's what has forced many countries to actually go and issue like Eurobonds, which is expensive. Or they go to local markets and crowd out the private sector. Either way, it's not good. So because of that, and it has happened for a long time, then you find that actually you are squeezed. You are borrowing, and yet also the private sector is not investing because it's dependent on the commercial banks, of which the rates are very expensive because you don't have very active capital markets. So it's like you're in a trap and you have to survive. So we are looking at all the proposals that have been put there. The SDG stimulus of 500 billion, we are looking at Bridgetown Initiative, we are looking at all the studies that have been done by the G20, one after the other. And then we find what's the solution. The solution sometimes will not come from outside. We also need to come back again and look at inside the domestic resource mobilization, and then how we utilize our money, how effectively, efficiently that we are using these kind of resources. This is a discussion we are going to have for a long time. And when it comes to climate, basically, it's not that you wake up one morning and be able, because the resources which are required, you can't even get it right away. But there are innovative ways of how we can start addressing the issues of climate. Just the issue, for example, when Rwanda took the issue of removing the plastic bags, it did not cost really too much. When we started using, when Rwanda started using Umuganda, the public works to plant trees, everybody went out and started planting trees, which can be done, which is being done in many countries as well. There are certain steps that can be done, and then the big things can be dealt with in a different way, and that's what we are looking for, alternatives. And that's the work that we are going to continue to work as ECA. But at least it's saying, what are the minimum that each country can do? Because not having too much money does not mean that you stop. But also in terms of financing your development, there are mechanisms that can be also done, and that's what we are going to focus on. We cannot give a solution at this point in time. There is another point which I wanted just also to give. The regional cooperation is very, very important. We cannot afford to have one country work alone and have another country also work alone. We saw it in East Africa when you had the problem, the issue of transporting our goods. At that point, when we saw that it was taking 21 days to transport goods from Mombasa to Rwanda, taking 18 days to Uganda, and taking 22 days to Burundi. It's a small distance, but going through the whole bureaucracy was a problem. I remember the president, I was in the Ministry of Finance, the president of Rwanda put some people on a truck. He says, I want you to understand what is going on. So he gave them money. He says, if you reach the border and they ask for money, pay it. If there's a roadblock, pay it. If there is anybody who needs money, just pay it. So they went to Mombasa and came back. They gave a report back. So the president took it to the presidents in the northern corridor for Uganda, Kenya. There was actually Ethiopia also represented, South Sudan, Rwanda, Burundi. And he gave the report to the heads of state. He said, in Uganda, these are how many roadblocks you have. These are how many way bridges you have. The same thing with Kenya. And he showed them that you have to pay insurance for your goods from one country to another to another. And he gave the whole everything. And the heads of state in one meeting, which took the whole day, they took decisions. They said for the goods coming from Mombasa, through many countries, they use only the commercial insurance. It solved the problem of the insurance. And they say the trucks should never be stopped at the border. They put the cargo tracking system, meaning they are not supposed to be stopped. They removed all the roadblocks. They kept way bridges, 2 of them, at the entry and exit. And then they also said because people are trading, that Kenya should give them the work permit so they can be based in Mombasa. And then they removed the roaming charges so that people can talk as if they are in their own countries. And so many other actions that were also taken, such as the people not needing to have their own passport, they can use their own local IDs. In 1 week, the goods which you are taking 21 days to Rwanda, it started taking 4 to 5 days. And it started taking 3 to 4 days to Uganda. So you could see the turnaround economy in a very short time, something that was really surprising everybody, just by making sure that the heads of state take decisions at a regional level, not at a national level only, because we are now dependent on each other. So I'm just saying that the regional perspective is very important. The regional cooperation is very, very important, but also how we do business internally is very, very important. We are still working on issues because the Summit of the Future is this September. And one of the issues that's going to be discussed is the reform of the international financial architecture, including the debt situation. The other one is also the issue of technology for the global digital compact that is also under discussion, where most of our countries are really lagging far, far, far behind. We have 1.6 billion of the people who are not connected, and most of them are on the African continent. And some of the issues you are discussing here, including what my sister Sarah mentioned, are the issues that are going to be discussed there at the global level, but also trying to find our own in-house solutions that can work. And what is very important is that once we find what can work, is that we should share among ourselves, so that whatever works in one country can also work in another country by sharing experiences. And that's the work of the ECA that can compile and make sure that we also share the experiences. We just had the Africa Business Forum, where we are focusing on science, technology, and innovations. And we had many innovations from many countries, from Kenya, from Ghana on artificial intelligence, from Rwanda on the vaccine, from many other countries. It was very interactive, it was very useful, and you could see that we could take some of the innovations that work and roll it out in many other countries. That is the work that we're going to do. We are not here to provide maybe the solutions, but your challenging us is very important, because we don't want to come here next year and tell you the same things. We have to come here to show you we have not done everything, but this is what we have found as solutions to some of the problems we are facing in some of the countries. Chair, I wanted just to stop. I could continue, but I don't want to stop here because I have another meeting. But I wanted just to thank our colleagues really for raising the issues. And I was told that you gave hard time to our team, which is very exciting for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Honourable Minister.
Let me thank our Rwanda colleague for raising. You were very specific about the subsidy on fuels. We have already embraced it. In the beginning of 2019, we removed subsidies on petrol, diesel, on fuels, because we realized that that subsidy, actually the biggest beneficiary is not the poor. It's actually the rich who have 3 SUVs each. They are the real beneficiaries, the biggest polluters. So we removed the subsidy. And our view was it's a blunt instrument. It is not a precise and sharp instrument. The way you sharpen it is actually by taxing fuel more and ring fencing that tax to enhance social protection programs, which are targeted at those who need the social protection. Better still, if that social protection is productive or conditional in nature rather than unconditional. But also use that extra revenue to maintain your roads. So we've embraced what you've just said. Hopefully there are a few others in the room who feel the same. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone with contribution before our ES takes leave of this meeting? There's a hand at the back there.
Thank you so much for the intervention. I'm from the UN country team, and specifically from UNIDO. And I'm so happy that during these past 3 days, there have been discussions in terms of the industrialization agenda, and in particular, Industry 4.0. I think, this is very good that, Africa is now focusing on the industrialization agenda. And also, I would like to encourage my colleagues in this room that they should also take advantage of the re-emerging interest on industrial policy agenda and the role of government as an enabler for that agenda. We know very well that under the enablers, we talk about issues to do with energy, access, industrial capital, research and development, infrastructure, etc. And I see those issues, they need to be addressed, and it can only happen if the ministries of finance, economic development and planning take the lead and ensure that industrial policy does not remain a sectorial type of intervention, but a national policy agenda. Lastly, but not least, I really want to encourage all the strategic stakeholders to collaborate, especially in the context of the SDGs, in particular those SDGs which relate to the economic growth agenda. And I would love to hear more in terms of what the new executive secretary thinks about it, especially on the SDGs and the economic SDGs 8, 9, and 17. What does it think, how can the UNECA play a role in pushing those agendas for Africa? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's be honest to ourselves. We have now an opportunity where we are all, as a continent, focusing in one direction in terms of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. As we mentioned at the very beginning, one of them is infrastructure. We need roads, we need rail, we need energy, we need water, we need all the areas of infrastructure. And at the same time, it's not only at the national level, we need them at the regional level, we need to connect as a continent together. That would facilitate trade, meaning the role of technology becomes useful because if you have to trade, technology has a big role to play as also part of the infrastructure. And that's why we are talking about the broadband, the whole infrastructure, the satellite, broadband, the undersea cable, and the rest of it. But at the same time, we don't need to trade the raw material, the unfinished goods, because we have been doing that for a long, long time, and so many countries where we export have benefited. We want to make sure that you have industries that work. And that's why we are focusing on the regions, so that this time it's not just each country having industries, which has to continue, but also we need also to produce at the regional level. I've been discussing with my brother here, Professor Nkube, on this Zimbabwe, Zambia agro-processing zone, so that this time we know that there is the land here, we know it's an agricultural land, and if we can establish a special economic zone that is focusing on processing, very addition to the final detail, that means that you can address the issues of food security. When we are talking about focusing, for example, on diamond in the Southern Africa, we know that the raw materials are there. What we need is just having a processing plant that can produce not for one country, but for all others so that we can be able to add more value. This month we'll be going to Botswana. Botswana has mastered in terms of beef exports to Europe. If we have a license to export to Europe, why should we be limited to Europe? Why can't you export to the Middle East? We had a discussion with Badea, and we'll be visiting there to the ground to see the whole value chain, and then to see how that can be scaled up. Many times, Badea is willing to finance any resources that is required, either to expand by the government of Botswana or even to bring in others, so that you can this time also start exporting to other markets. But then the supply should not necessarily be from Botswana. It can be from the entire region. If we get it right, it can benefit not only Botswana in terms of more jobs, in terms of more income, but also it can benefit the neighboring countries. And those are the kind of industries that we want so that we can reach the final product. We are also looking at Ghana and Ivory Coast in terms of cocoa. For a long time, it's like another Inga Dam that we talked about in terms of the chocolate. If you ask any young kid, they will tell you chocolate comes from Europe. But yet the cocoa is growing in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, and many other countries. We want to see why can't we develop industry to the final product in terms of adding value. So we are trying to see different ways of coming up with industries so that whether you are exporting among the African countries or you are exporting abroad, you add value. There is no reason why we should be able now at this point in time export raw minerals to any of the advanced countries. You are exporting it to India, you are exporting it to Europe for processing. Why can't the processing take place on our continent? So when you are thinking about building industries, we are trying to see how these industries can be able to add value to the final level, not just doing it halfway, not exporting the raw materials, but having industries that are really addressing our own problems so that those jobs and also the resources can stay on the African continent. That's what we are looking at, but we cannot chew everything at the same time. We want to pick some of the pockets, critical minerals, agriculture, energy, so many other things that can be able to have a quick impact on our continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this conversation, sir. We were discussing over lunch with Hanan. We were asking why should Egypt be importing beef from Latin America when Botswana and the other countries can do it? They're producing quality beef. Again, the same thing with chickens. Why do we have these chickens coming from Brazil, which even the quality is questioned when we put them on the table? So these are all fundamental issues, yes, we have been asking ourselves to map the way forward for this value addition and processing. But thank you so much. Let me thank you for giving us this time and for your frank exchange with the countries. We hope we continue with this conversation. Thank you, sir. And we thought we could also discuss NEPAD projects and really understand the PIDA projects, where are we, the status, etc., the strategies, and practically what are they doing on the ground? What are the issues? What are the bottlenecks, especially on the corridors? There's Dr. Gideon Nimako. If he could come to the podium for some conversation, would appreciate it. Thank you. This is why somebody gave me a title, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, Enhancing Regional Integration, Digital Transformation, and Security. Somebody just give me this. Yeah. Is he coming? Do you know him? Is that him? Regional integration, digital transformation. Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the conference. Earlier on, during the 2 days, I think there have been issues relating to regional projects, corridors, etc., the broader infrastructure projects for the African continent. And I think the approach which has been circulating in terms of the positioning of Africa, focusing on these corridors to ensure connectivity, be they road, rail, etc., etc. So we thought if you guys, your colleagues from NEPAD could really, because there were issues which related to projects under your purview. So we thought it would be good for the countries to listen to from you where we are, what are the issues, etc., so that we can get an update on this. Thank you very much for accepting our request. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, and thank you very much, Chair, for the invitation. Okay, thank you very much, Chair, and the Excellencies for this opportunity. We'll be having a slide presentation, and then later on, my colleague Snowden will allude to the very question you did ask, particularly on regional infrastructure projects, the status we are in, and how we look into the future. So I don't know if the presentation, do I need to go to the podium or I can present it from, okay. All right, next slide, please. So I want to briefly talk about the Agenda 2063, particularly in relation to the second 10-year plan, which is what we are calling the decade of acceleration, and some of the pain points that we are discovering, particularly when it comes to regional projects and also country-level projects. Next slide. So really, our work actually emanates from a decision from the AU Assembly to evaluate the first decade of Agenda 2063 and also propose a plan for the continent for the next decade. I'm not going to go through everything because as I was listening in, most of the issues have been alluded to. It will look as if I'm repeating, so I will skip a lot of the material and focus on the very subject matter that you, Chair, indicated. Next slide. So as we can see on the screen, the evaluation of the first decade of the Agenda 2063 actually indicated that the plan is still relevant. It is very coherent, particularly with the SDGs and the high fives and other international frameworks. However, when you look at effectiveness in terms of the target that we did set for ourselves for the first decade, there are areas that needs improvement. Actually, as a continent, we scored 39%. which means that if you look at collectively all the targets that we set for ourselves, the achievement stands at 39%, which is quite worrying. Most of these can be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. But even before the COVID, you realize that the pace was a bit slow in terms of achieving those targets. Next slide. So there are 7 aspirations, as most of you may be aware of. When it comes to aspiration 1, the progress is not quite encouraging. And also aspiration 5, which talks about our cultural values. I think as a continent, more work needs to be done in terms of paying more attention to some of the initiatives that will harness our cultural values. Issues of connectivity, which relates to aspiration 2, actually is quite lagging. Next slide. So there is a strong convergence between Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. We've done some work in this area. Actually, when you compare the 20 goals of Agenda 2063 with the 17 goals of the SDGs, there is high convergence. But we must admit that there are areas of differentiation. Although they are the same, there are some areas that are not the same. And so within the second decade, we want to pay more attention, not just on the areas of convergence, but areas of differentiation, which will help both agendas in terms of implementation and execution. Next slide. Now, we all know that our population, so going into the second, we are looking at the transitions. By 2063, actually Africans' population will be a third of global population, and majority will be the youth. So the question that we do ask ourselves is that if you are renting into the future, particularly in the next decade, how do you exploit this transition and demographic transitions that we are seeing, which is quite increasing going into the future. Next slide. However, when you look into the future, if you forecast into the future, actually Africa will improve in a number of development indicators. Poverty is eventually in the future will reduce. But there's one that is quite stubborn going into the future, and that is the informal sector. Our models actually shows us that informal sector will remain if we don't have radical intervention. And the idea is not actually to formalize the informal sector, is how to understand and exploit the informal sector, particularly if you are looking at domestic resource mobilization. How do you exploit the informal sector? So for us, it's quite critical in terms of our intervention, and there are some body of work that is actually looking at this area, how to exploit the informal sector economically, but actually most of our social activities are actually residing in the informal sector. So it's quite critical, and we thought of showing this, this visual. Next slide. So going into the next decade, most of you excellencies are aware of this. We have 7 aspirations, but if you look at intermediate results, how do we want to see the continent by 2033? And 2033 is very important because you have the SDGs ending in 2030. 3 years after, then you have Agenda 2063 second 10-year plan ending. So it's quite critical that we pay attention to some of these targets that we have set for ourselves in the second 10-year plan. We have what we call the 7 moonshots, and these are 7 states in which we want to see every African country by 2033. The first one is that we want African countries, all African countries, to be in middle income status by 2033. It's the lead moonshot. At certain forums, we've been told that this is quite ambitious, cautiously ambitious. But we in the AUDA feel it's something that is achievable if the right policy and regulatory and also the interventions are put in place. So these are the 7 moonshots that we've set for ourselves for the next decade. That is starting from 2024 to 2033. Next slide. But here we want to focus on financing. We all know the interventions that are required in each of the 7 moonshots, but how do you finance these 7 moonshots? And I think from yesterday up to today, that has been the focus of most of our discussion. Whilst the indicator framework, even for the SDGs and the Agenda 2063, indicate the transformation that we want to achieve, the budget for member states actually signals the investment choices. Actually, it signals the direction, the development direction of a country. So when you are costing a plan such as this, you cannot actually delineate that process from country level budgeting processes. Next slide. So that is what we did in collaboration with UNDP. Actually, we analyzed 40 countries' budgeting data set for the past 10 years, mapped them both to the SDGs and Agenda 2063, and then try to model into the future as against the 7 moonshots. So this is one way. It's not the only way. The other way is also to look at the interventions that we have actually alluded to in each of the 7 moonshots and try to cost it. But that has some shortcomings. So we believe that it's supposed to be a bottom-up approach where you project what country levels are actually executing and budgeting for, and then project into the future. Next slide. Next slide, please. So if you do that and look at the historical data, you'll realize that if countries actually stay on the same course, what we are calling business as usual, you have a certain pattern. If you marry it with the target space that we've set for ourselves in the second 10-year plan, there is a financial gap that is required for each of the 7 moonshots. Actually, we've done the same for the SDGs, where you have the gap, the financial gap that is required for achieving those targets in each of the 7 moonshots. Next slide. So targeting is very important. You have country-level targets that relates to continental-level targets. And sometimes it's not a one-to-one mapping, and it's not actually necessarily an aggregation from bottom up. Sometimes there are differentiation in terms of some of the regional targets and continental targets that we set. Next slide. So for each of the 7 moonshots, the costing actually differentiates between the business as usual, as I've indicated, and what we call the push scenario, what is required. So if you do that, then you have a financial gap target, a financial gap of about $3 trillion for the 10 years that we are looking into the future. You can actually disaggregate them at moonshot level, at target level, even go as far as the country level and look at how these initiatives that we as a continent are actually executing relates to the gap that we have actually identified. Next slide. Next slide. So for each of the 7 moonshots, so the question is now, if you know the gap, how do you finance it? In which areas is critical? Prioritization becomes important. Of course, when you look at each of the 7 moonshots, there are plateau of initiatives that you can have, but you need to identify critical initiatives that addressing or closing the gap should actually concentrate on. So for instance, for moonshot 1, we do have manufacturing and value addition as one of the critical drivers for achieving moonshot 1. Agricultural productivity is also another moonshot driver for one. And then good governance. Good governance is also key. So for addressing and financing each of the moonshot, care must be taken to each of these drivers that have been identified for each moonshot. Next slide. It's the same thing as the previous one. Next slide. So you can look at it by sector. If you look at agricultural productivity, actually, if you look at agricultural productivity, it's actually how to get more from the input that you're putting into the system. And irrigation and water resources is very, very important. And so if you look at the visual that I'm looking at, actually, as a continent, if you look at our water reserves, it's not that we don't have the water bodies, the water reserves and how we are utilizing that to increase agricultural productivity. There's more needs to be done in that area. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide in the interest of time? So these are some costing that we've actually alluded, looking at one particular sector, and we've done it for most of the critical sectors for our economies. Next slide. So now comes to infrastructure, which I think relates to what the chair was alluding to. So you need to, your agricultural productivity is important. Your productivity levels needs to increase. But then you can't do it alone. You also have to marry that with your infrastructure. And looking at the visual that has been just projected in terms of regional infrastructure project distributed across the 5 regions, these are the projects that we have identified under PIDA PAP 2. And my colleague Snowden will talk to that in a minute. Next slide. But there are challenges. Financing is always an issue, as has been alluded to in previous session. Capacity is also important. Technical issues are also important. Governance is also one of the challenges impeding the regional infrastructure projects that we've identified with the regional economic communities. Next slide. Another area is also power. Power is also a critical area that most of our interventions are also looking at, what we call the Continental Master Plan for Africa. It's an area that has started recently. But if you look at Moonshot 1, moving all AU member state to middle income status, and you have a key driver such as manufacturing, there's no way you can do that without power. Next slide. Next slide, please. So financing, I think this has been one of the pain points. And these are some of the challenges that we've been talking about since morning. The debt burdens that we have, issues of external shocks. All these are factors that are exerting pressures on our abilities to mobilize financing for development. Next slide. But the context needs to be set right. And if you are looking at re-engineering the global financial architecture, you realize that the history actually tells you a lot. Because if you look at the Bretton Woods institution, the way it was architected in the 1940s, it hasn't changed much over the years. And that is why we have this discussion of rethinking the global financial architecture. But for us, it provides an opportunity for us to look at a dedicated fund for Agenda 2063. There are so many funds, one for peace, all scattered around, but if you look at it sectorially, you don't get a full picture, and critical areas always tend to be left out. So you need a consolidated view of all funds towards the comprehensive view of the development agenda of the continent, which is, in our view, Agenda 2063 and the SDGs. Next slide. So for us, we pinpoint it on three rationale. First of all, we want to project the continent as a global lead in resiliency and sustainability by 2033. And for us, it provides us the impetus for having a consolidated fund that looks at all the areas of Agenda 2063. Rethinking financing or development in Africa is also a critical issue. And the last point, which I think I will try to conclude on, there are a number of slides, but I think the discussion is more important than going through all the slides, is the issue of two agenda, one framework. And this is an issue that between the two institutions, the AUC and UNECA, it has progressed, but I think the devil is in the detail. When we look at two agenda, one framework, what exactly are we talking about? Are we only talking about financing or jointly implementing development initiative? And this discussion actually is ongoing. Next slide. So these are the needs. We need a comprehensive view. We need to look at how we restructure our investments. We also need to bridge the gap. There is a clear gap, and we need to do that. The question here is the how. And I think that is the question that has been brooding at the practicalities of how do you do this. And the feasibility study that we're conducting, actually, member states have requested us to look at the how part. How do you, if you have a fund for Agenda 2063, how do you capitalize and recapitalize the issues of sustainability of such a fund? How do you marry that with the African Development Fund at the AFDB? These are all questions that are brooding and needs further interrogation. And that is the body of work that we currently undertaking within the agency. Next slide. Next slide. So these are some of the options, and I think the Honorable Minister, I've forgotten, actually was alluding to the expensive nature of some of these options that we put on the table. But we don't think that you need to have a single source. You need to have heterogeneity when you are looking at sourcing a facility, a comprehensive facility for a big plan such as Agenda 2063. And so the question that we're brooding out with ourselves within the agency is how do we capitalize and how do you bring all these things into practicality? How do you start it? How do you sustain it? Next slide. So we have the view for a fund like this that about 90% of the sourcing should be domestic resource mobilization. We can't run away from that. We've all known the challenges of ODAs, the global financial architecture. The only way for us to finance our own development is through domestic resources. And so when we are looking at that, the question is how do you capitalize using all these sources and recommendations that we have alluded to. Next slide. Next slide. So I'm pretty sure a lot of the excellencies and a lot of the audience here know about AUD and NEPAD, what we do, the differentiation between the AUC and the AUD and NEPAD. So I want to pause here, Chair, in the interest of time, and then we look at some of the regional infrastructure project, the details of it, which my colleague Snowden would talk to in a couple of 5 minutes, and then we can open it up for discussion. I want to end here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gideon, and Your Excellency, the Chairperson, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I will not spend much time, but I would rather provide practical examples on the progress that the Program for Infrastructure Development for Africa, PIDA, attained in the last 10 years. We've now gone into the second phase of PIDA, which is now coined as PIDA PAP 2. Nevertheless, where you have successes, you normally also have challenges. So PIDA has got its successes. Nevertheless, there have also been challenges that we faced along the way in implementing a PIDA program. So in my talking, I'm not going to use the PowerPoint, but I was taking note from the presentations that have been made since the day that this event was opening. And some of the issues which were coming, I would also try and present them and also highlight as to how PIDA is addressing some of those issues as some of the probable solutions. So in terms of progress, there is a progress report which is available online, and this is termed as the PIDA 10-year implementation progress report. This report can be downloaded and the details of the progress can be accessed. However, let me highlight, since we are here in Zimbabwe, I would also try to highlight some of the key successes in the southern part of the continent with regards to the PIDA progress. One of the issues which was raised yesterday, and I think even today, and which every literature that you read, and will never get tired about talking about it, is the lack of bankable projects. Lack of bankable projects in each and every document that you read when it comes to infrastructure development, lack of bankable project has been coined to be one of the detrimental factors to infrastructure development in the continent. However, under PIDA 1, there were projects, and I'll just highlight one of the corridors in the continent. This is the North-South corridor. This is the corridor that starts from Durban. It goes through Botswana, and it spans either through Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, it gets into Zambia, and Zambia, it goes into DRC. The same corridor sometimes also changes its name, but it starts all the way from Dar es Salaam into Zambia, Zambia into DRC. And in some other cases, it spans away from Harare and goes through Mozambique. Mozambique, it goes into Malawi, and Malawi connects up north also to Tanzania. This is one of the corridors also which was under the PIDA program. And under this particular PIDA program, phase 1, there were links which were identified. These were links on the rail side, a road sector, as well as the energy part of it. And this is where I want to demonstrate about why we need project development facilities that are well-resourced and well-financed, which AUD and NEPAD is currently undertaking in collaboration with Afrexim Bank in order to establish a project preparation facility that should actually also eliminate the challenges that we're facing with when it comes up to project preparation. Nevertheless, AFDB has done a tremendous work when it comes up to also infrastructure project preparation. So under this particular corridor, 5 roads were prepared with the financing from the African Development Bank, and the tune of the financing was $7.4 million US dollars. 2 sections are in Botswana, 1 section is in Malawi, and there are other sections in Zambia, and then there's also another section in Zimbabwe, the Gwanda Bay Bridge Road. Ladies and gentlemen, from the 7.4 million that was spent on preparing and packaging these projects to bankability, you would be shocked that these projects have amassed investments to the tune of 2.1 billion US dollars for construction. And some of the projects are currently undergoing construction. And this is one of the major achievements of the PIDA program. Apart from the roads, which I've just highlighted in here, there's also another energy line, which was normally called the Tanzania-Kenya-Zambia Power Interconnector, and it was coined by this name KZT, or taking the names of those countries. This was also a project which was also on the north-south corridor, but on the energy side of it. With proper collaboration between the countries, funding has also been established, funding has been sourced, and some of the sections on this particular transmission line are under construction, and some are also undergoing construction. There's been about 10,000 kilometers of roads that have also been constructed under PIDA. So there's been quite a number of progress that has also been attained under PIDA project. But as I did say earlier on, that all the details on the progress that have been attained so far are contained in the report, which is available online. Chair, allow me just to mention now some of the key challenges that we faced in the implementation of the PIDA project. And one of the key issues or the challenges which maybe this particular gathering should take forth and maybe identify as to how do we move forward in terms of the solutions, is that most of the projects that are under PIDA are not found in the national development plans. And one would ask, but what is the challenge if you have a program in a PIDA and then the program does not reflect itself in the national development plans? Here is the challenge. One of the mandates of AUD and NEPAD is also to mobilize resources to implement some of these programs for the countries. So when you have a project that is under PIDA and you take it to some of the partners always ask you to say, but you have a project, you are saying it's a priority, but this priority is not reflected in the National Development Plan. That on its own also brings in a bit of challenges. And as we all know, most of the infrastructure development in the continent still remains under the funding of the governments. And we all know that the fiscal space for the governments is limited and has got so many competing factors for the same meager resources that we have. In this particular regard, it means, though we've been talking about the PPPs, engaging the private sector, the practical aspects of engaging the private sector in infrastructure space still remains a challenge. And we need to find practical solutions on how we can engage the private sector to be involved in the infrastructure development. I know of the tremendous work that has been done by UNECA in terms of the model laws that have been developed to make sure that the private sector are encouraged to be involved in the private sector. We need definitely to popularize these particular laws and make sure that we are using and we are actually capitalizing the domestic resources that the continent has. And the other challenge that also PIDA project faced was the challenges related to infrastructure, transboundary infrastructure projects. We normally face challenges when it comes out to a project that spans so many countries. There are so many reasons that sometimes you end up having some challenges. And the practical case of these particular challenges is what the honorable member, the Secretary General for UNECA talked about in terms of the web bridges, the multiplicity of web bridges across the continent. Why are we having multiple web bridges across the continent? These are some of the challenges that the continent faces when it comes up to issues of trust. Do we trust a certificate issued by one web bridge at one locality that it can be transmitted to other localities and it should be accepted? In this particular case, under PIDA-PAP 2, there is also a program which is also being driven by the SADC as Secretariat, which is also part of the tripartite program, which is looking at having a roadmap or a master plan of the web bridges in the tripartite region, but also this is going to extend to the other parts of the continent so that the multiplicity of web bridges can be reduced and to avoid delays of transit goods along the corridors. Allow me also just to conclude by saying that as much as we made progress in the infrastructure development, but also looking at what I've just mentioned, here you have noted that I've only mentioned about roads, I've mentioned about energy, I've mentioned slightly, I think in the presentation which I made earlier on the ICT parts of it. However, we must not lose sight and have a blind spot looking at the fact that now we are also trying to go into green energy. Road transport is one of the biggest polluters. However, our continent is not endowed when it comes to the rail network. So the rail network combined with energy should be also another way that must be going into in terms of enhancing transport connectivity and making sure that we've got clean energy. Finally, we do not talk much, when we talk infrastructure, we do not talk much about sanitation. I think we should also now start talking about water, and also we should not have a blind spot on sanitation. I thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues, for the presentation, quite enlightening. I don't know whether you could help us with our DRC colleagues, the INGA. Is there anything you can talk about? What's happening, etc.? Sorry, there was an inquiry, but I just thought given the issues raised on INGA, I think we need, and the potential, which I don't want to talk about any more potential. I want practical things. So what is happening over these years? Where are we? Can you enlighten us? Thanks. As we close at 6. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will try and attempt with regards to INGA. INGA is one of the flagship programs when it comes up to powering Africa. And INGA is one of the programs that, if it was to materialize, it would light up Africa. However, INGA was also, I would say, INGA was also one of the flagship programs under PIDA-PAP 1, but there wasn't much progress with regards to having an agreement on how INGA program should also move forward in terms of the actual feasibility studies, the construction, and then actualizing INGA program. One of the challenges that we face with INGA program, I think, is on the multiplicity of interests from several stakeholders, and that has also created some kind of chaos when it came up to INGA program. However, Your Honor, Chair, as Africans, I think we should take INGA project as one of the key priorities, and we should have clear action plans and clear roadmap on how INGA program or INGA project can be effected and make sure that it indeed powers Africa. The Southern African Power Pool has been working also on making sure that once Inga is up and running, the transmission lines also connecting all the way to Central Africa as well to Southern Africa are in place. So Inga, I think, is a low-hanging fruit, which just needs the political will, which also needs proper coordination for the continental stakeholders to make sure that Inga is a reality and it can power Africa. Thank you.
Okay. You said something, but I haven't really seen where we are going. Is it political willpower lacking? Are the feasibility studies done? Really, I don't know. Maybe it's too sensitive. Okay. All right. Okay, maybe I'd be interested to talk to my colleagues from DRC and just get a feel for myself what is happening, if it's okay with you guys. Okay, we can do that later.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole. Je pense à notre niveau, ce qui devrait être communiqué par rapport à Inga. Nous l'avons fait. Je pense que vous-même, vous avez dit, il y a plusieurs aspects qui entrent en jeu. Je pense que Madame la ministre, ministre d'État, ministre du Plan, arrive le lundi. Je préfère qu'on puisse approfondir en privé avec elle cet aspect de Inga. Quant à nous, techniciens, je pense que tout ce qu'on a dit ici est plus ou moins suffisant. Merci.
Good. I'm told the report is ready with some announcement will be made on accessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, honorable delegates. I've been advised that the report is now ready. It's been uploaded to our conference app as well as Indico. You've just been provided with the QR codes, so you can actually download the reports and view them. The other issue is that the evaluation forms for this conference, for these 3 days, are also now available for you. Can you hear me now? All right, sorry about that. So I'll start again. So the report of these 3 days of proceedings is now ready. It has been uploaded to the conference app, COM 2024 app, as well as to Indico. The QR code has just been shared with all of you. You can also see it on the screen. So please download that QR code and you can view the report. The other issue is that the evaluation forms for these 3 days of proceedings, the expert segment is also has also been uploaded. Please, we request all member states to spare a few minutes to complete the evaluation form. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Okay. Can we give people 2 minutes to connect and then, wow, 5 past. I don't know if colleagues, you've managed to upload the document using the QR code here. If you could do that. Who's presenting? Colleagues from NEPAD, thank you very much. I hope you're still around. I want a conversation one-on-one, just one for my own understanding. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, colleagues, there's a proposal that whilst we load the paper, our report, then we can have a quick break to stretch our legs, etc. I don't know if there's still tea or coffee out there, and then we can come back at 6:30. And also people can quickly review the report, and let's see if we need more time, so be it. Maybe we can agree, we'll map up the way forward. Okay, so let's take the break and then come back at 6:30.
Good evening, delegates. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me clearly? I understand that the chair's announcement of the break was not audible. Can everyone hear me now? Right. So the chair announced that we take a break for 30 minutes, come back at 6:30, so that delegates have an opportunity to download the app, download the report, and go through it. So we are on break now for half an hour. Come back at 6:30. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, can we call our meeting to order, please? And I hope we've had the opportunity to look at the draft report of our deliberations for the past 3 days. I think maybe we might want to find better ways of preparing these reports as we go forward, so that we are much more efficient as we work on these meetings, etc. So now our rapporteur will be presenting the report. If you could come up here, Sheila Numawamanya. I hope I got it right. Thank you. So the proposal is that our rapporteur goes through the report based on the sessions as per the schedule of our programming of our meetings, and then we then can comment on each section as she goes through the report. She doesn't have to read item by item, but where there are serious challenges with the presentation, coverage, etc., so we can indicate and ask for intervention. So we'll look at part one, you go to section 1, and etc., and then we'll move on as rapidly as we can. I'm quite aware that tomorrow we are starting early. There's an 8:30 side event, so we need to be out of here as quickly as possible, but without, of course, compromising our conversation and the input from the floor. So, Rapporteur, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the draft report of the Committee of Experts on its 42nd meeting. We start with page 1. Page 1 to 3 detail the opening of the meeting. We have the introduction, and then part 1, which was the opening. It details the attendance of the meeting, the opening statements that were made, and the election of the Bureau and adoption of the agenda and program of work. If there are any comments on this section.
Any comments, colleagues? Good, let's move on.
We move to part 2. Part 2 is the account of proceedings. Roman 3 was overview of recent economic and social developments in Africa. We had a presentation, a discussion, and recommendations arising out of the discussion. Any comments?
Yes, Rapporteur, on line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, where it says owing to weak global demand, I think wouldn't it be even more emphatic? We were talking of low commodity prices. I think it's the weak global demand and the low commodity prices. I don't know how you can fit it in there, because that's a critical element. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10th line. Thank you.
Thank you. We go to Roman 4, which was assessment of progress on regional integration in Africa. It's followed the same format. We had a presentation, discussion, and recommendations arising out of the discussion. Any comments on Roman 4?
I would request colleagues to focus especially on the recommendations, so that we ensure full coverage of the recommendations or changes to the recommendations, so that they reflect the true position in terms of what we recommended, if there are any omissions, etc., etc. Thank you.
We look at Roman 5 now. Roman 5 was presentation on the theme of the 56th session of the Economic Commission for Africa. We had a presentation, a discussion, and recommendations. Chair, under Part C, number 27, there are some typos there, but the Secretariat is aware of these and these will be worked on. If there are any other comments on the floor.
Yeah, Rapporteur, I think we talked about the issue of mainstreaming national capital accounting into the national accounts, and then also the rebasing of our, as a consequence of that, the rebasing of our GDPs accordingly. I think we need to capture it somewhere. I don't know where you want to put it, but I think it was a major issue we discussed. Paragraph 26. I thought it would come as a recommendation. Are we together, Rapporteur?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
We go to Roman 6. These are statutory issues. We have the report of the Executive Secretary on the activities of the Economic Commission for Africa from April 2023 to February 2024. We also had a report on the follow-up to the resolutions of the Conference of African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. Part C, reports on the work of the subsidiary bodies of the Economic Commission for Africa. Here we had a presentation, discussion, and recommendations. Any comments on page 8?
Okay, on page 8, 3, paragraph 30A, I think also again we discussed the issue of the ACA should now focus on a large transformative, instead of spreading resources and activities too thinly, to focus on transformative regional projects or something like that. Where do you want us to put that? It can be this first point, Roman numeral, or okay, I will leave it to the rapporteur to under B. Okay, wherever. ACA should, okay, all right. Egypt is online. Can we bring them through, connect with Egypt?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for giving Egypt the floor. And we would like firstly to commend you for your perseverance and the excellent way you have been steering our meeting today. Chair, I have raised my hand on page 6, but maybe for technical issues, I wasn't able to take the floor on that particular point. So if, with your indulgence, given the technical difficulties, I will try to say my comments. They are very, very minor, but I will, if you may, I will say them in one shot so we can move forward quickly with the meeting. So on page 6, paragraph B, Roman numeral 5, it says ACA to review the convergence criteria. We would like maybe to have a clarification about this convergence criteria. My second comment is on page 11, paragraph 40, A, Roman numeral I1. It says budget allocation of at least 1%. We believe that this number is maybe a matter of national sovereignty, so we believe that we shouldn't put at least a number, but maybe encourage countries to have budget allocation in that in that end. My third comment is on page 13, paragraph 46, B, Roman numeral 3. It says ACA to support the African Union Commission in establishing an African Credit rating system. We believe that there were already policy organs decisions at the African Union decision in relation to this credit rating system, and we have a formulation instead of what is written, is to support the African Union Commission effort to enhance the capacity of member states in the area of credit rating. And going back as well to some of the African Union decision, we believe that it should be the support to the APRM, not the AUC, to develop an African credit rating system. This is one of the outcomes of the STC that was held in Nairobi in July 2023. So these, Mr. Chair, are our very minor comments on the document, and we will submit as well written submission to the Commission in that end. Thank you very much.
If we could have the written comments as soon as possible so that we move on with the documentation, but much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, if you can go back to our processes now. Rapporteur, guide us. Where were we?
Chair, we are on page 9, Part D, proposed program plan and budget for 2025. We had a presentation, a discussion, and some recommendations. Any comments?
Sorry, paragraph 30, page 10, paragraph 35A, Roman numeral 3, ensure the timely settlement of financial contribution support. I thought we also agreed that members should be notified of their areas, blah, 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 blah. I think we discussed that at great length. And also the issue of, I don't know if you want to put it in here, that members who are in areas in terms of attendance, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if we want to include that. What's the pleasure of but we discussed that. I don't know if members are comfortable for us to include that. It's up to the floor. All right. Algeria, and followed by Benin. Thank you, colleagues.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Comme c'est la première fois que cette délégation prend la parole, nous tenons à vous féliciter pour la manière avec laquelle vous dirigez nos travaux. Monsieur le Président, ma remarque a trait à la page 9, la recommandation numéro 3, c'est-à-dire, je vais la citer en anglais, « Ensure the independence of central banks to enable them to implement monetary policy effectively ». Quand on lit ce dispositif, on a l'impression qu'on a affaire à on laisse entendre qu'il y a certaines banques centrales qui ne sont pas indépendantes et qu'on demande aux États membres de respecter leur indépendance. On trouve que ce paragraphe est quelque peu impertinent et gagnerait à être reformulé d'une autre manière ou tout simplement supprimé. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Okay. I think we might change the wording. I recall we discussed the issue. I think it came from, I can't remember, one of the participants from, I think it was Burundi, who mentioned the issue of consistency between monetary policy and fiscal policy. I think that point can come here. I thought that's the context would capture that. I don't know, Burundi, if you recall the conversation, please, before we go to Benin.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. De mon côté, ce n'était pas par rapport à l'indépendance de la Banque centrale, c'était surtout par rapport à la coordination des politiques monétaire et budgétaire dans le cadre du financement, justement. Ce n'était pas l'indépendance.
Thank you. So can we, Rapporteur, can we, item Roman numeral 3, let's ensure it's not about independence, we're talking about the systematic coordination of the two monetary and fiscal policies to ensure macroeconomic stability, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how you want to put it. Thank you.
Ensure macroeconomic stability, but also to foster structural transformation.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Benin, please.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Concernant le Bénin, je crois que le débat qu'on a eu sur les différents programmes, on n'a pas mentionné, c'est vrai qu'on a annoncé les programmes, mais on n'a pas mentionné le débat qui portait sur les éléments de motivation de cette restructuration des programmes. Ça, c'est le premier point. Et concernant la recherche, je crois qu'il y avait une recommandation sur la recherche et qui dit que les États doivent mettre à disposition au moins 1% de leur budget. Je crois que les 1%, qu'est-ce qui motive de pouvoir fixer ces 1%? Je préfère qu'on donne une recommandation dans le sens qu'on améliore les ressources à l'endroit de la recherche au lieu de fixer les 1%. Voilà. Maintenant, si vous permettez, dans la première partie, il y a une recommandation qui abordait d'accélérer la mise en place des fonds monétaires.
Sorry, could you indicate the paragraph so that we are together?
Okay.
Or even the pages and the paragraph. Thanks.
D'accord. Je crois que c'est la page 6 en français. La page 6 en français. La page 6 en français qui dit, recommandation qui dit accélérer l'opérationnalisation des institutions financières africaines énoncées dans le traité d'Abuja. En fait, ce que nous notons pour cette recommandation, dans ce processus d'accélération, comment pouvoir apprécier cela? Et donc, je ne sais pas comment il faudra reformuler. C'est un peu vague. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Rapporteur, Benin is talking, I think, about paragraph C22, Roman numeral 3. You got it? Did you get the gist of the comments? Benin, could you please request a repeat of your comments so that the rapporteur can capture? Thank you.
Ça marche. Je disais tantôt que sur les recommandations liées à la présentation du thème de la session, et donc on est à la page 6, et il y a une recommandation qui évoque, qui dit précisément à la page 6 d'accélérer l'opérationnalisation des institutions financières africaines énoncées dans le traité d'Abuja, tels que le Fonds monétaire africain, la Banque centrale africaine et la Banque africaine d'investissement, afin de surmonter les barrières monétaires. Et j'ai dit de façon précise, qu'est-ce qu'on fait par rapport à cette recommandation? Elle me paraît un peu vague, parce qu'on ne pourra pas l'apprécier après. Parce qu'il faut une question de termine pour leur mise en œuvre. C'est ce que je suis en train de dire sur ce point. Sur la question de la recherche, j'avais dit tout à l'heure que sur la question de la recherche, il avait été évoqué dans l'une des recommandations qu'il faudra attribuer 1%. 1% pour au moins 1%, que les États attribuent au moins 1%. C'est précisément sur les rapports des activités des organes judiciaires de la Commission et au titre des recommandations. On dit que les membres de la CA devraient allouer judicieusement au moins 1% de leur budget national au soutien à la recherche fondamentale et appliquée du développement de l'innovation. Et je dis, qu'est-ce qui motive les 1%? On ne pourra pas le préciser. Et donc, il faudrait que ça reste dans l'esprit d'une augmentation des ressources liées à ça pour permettre à chaque État de pouvoir apprécier cela. Le dernier point que j'avais évoqué, j'ai dit, Sur les éléments de débat, on avait évoqué les différents programmes, la restructuration des différents programmes. Dans le compte rendu qui est fait, on a évoqué la restructuration des différents programmes du plan, mais les éléments motivants, c'est-à-dire la motivation de cette restructuration, je me rappelle que ça avait fait objet de débat et il fallait clarifier cela. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Okay. Okay. So we go, based on the English version, the paragraph C22, Roman numeral 3, the delegation from Benin, they're saying that whole sentence is not clear, vague, etc. So they're saying either we can delete it or explain really what was captured. Okay? And then the other issue which came out was the 1%. I think also Egypt raised this issue, saying this is a sovereign issue, etc., etc. Should we be recommending specific numbers, or we can just broadly give the thrust of the recommendation? Okay? Yeah. And then on the restructuring of the programs, again, the issues relating to the restructuring of the various programs under ECA. I think that is being raised by Benin. You got it? Okay. Good. Guide me, where were we?
Chair, we are on page 10.
Page 10.
Part C. We're continuing the reports on the work.
Sorry, I'm told there's Egypt online and we have Cameroon. Egypt, are they ready? Egypt, please come on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our comments were sent to the Secretariat. Thank you.
Can we have Cameroon, please? For your comments, sorry, if we could be specifics with the paragraphs, etc., so that we can zero in on the changes. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais revenir à la recommandation de la page 6 sur l'opérationnalisation des institutions financières pour relever qu'elle nous semble plutôt pertinente. Peut-être qu'on devait insister, qu'on devait davantage détailler, mais nous pensons que les États membres savent ce qu'il leur reste à faire. Les protocoles et les statuts de ces institutions-là ayant déjà été adoptés, même s'il faut les réactualiser au regard de la conjoncture, nous pensons que ce qui reste à faire, c'est la signature et la ratification des instruments juridiques passés de ces institutions-là par les États. Et donc, en prenant la recommandation de manière générique, sous le prisme de l'accélération de l'opérationnalisation, nous pensons qu'elle est plutôt correcte ainsi. Merci.
Thank you. So it's the issue of ratification and of these various treaties and arrangements. Rapporteur.
Thank you, Chair. We are on page 10, Part C. Continuing with reports on the work of the subsidiary bodies of the Economic Commission for Africa. This is page 10 and 11. Presentation, discussion, and recommendations. Any comments? Part C and D.
Rapporteur, you have captured on the first one, the 1%, blah, 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 we've done that, okay. Any contributions? Good. Let's. Oh, Algeria, come through.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 11, Roman 5, formulate and implement credible strategies. Instead of credibles, it might be more useful to put efficient than credible, because it's obvious that we will be adopting or trying to search for credible strategies, so we don't have to mention it here. So instead, we have to put efficient. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well noted. Rapporteur, let's move.
We are now on page 12, part E.
Oh, sorry, there's DRC.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole. Je voudrais ici soulever la question qu'un ami, qu'un collègue africain a dit autour de 1% qu'on doit accorder dans le budget de chaque État à la recherche scientifique. Il s'agit plutôt d'une recommandation de l'UNESCO qui recommande à chaque État d'allouer un budget conséquent de 1%. C'est arrêté par une recommandation de l'UNESCO, et ça je le soulève. Il n'est pas question de dire le 1% là, quoi c'est-à-dire? J'ai dit c'est bien précis, une recommandation de l'UNESCO qui souhaite que chaque État alloue un budget conséquent de 1% à la recherche scientifique pour l'avancement et les progrès de la recherche scientifique partout au monde. Voilà, Monsieur le Président, une précision que je devrais apporter, puisque un collègue africain qui dit « Oh, je ne vois pas l'opportunité de ces 1%, je lui ai dit, et je lui dis que c'est une recommandation, je lui précise, c'est une recommandation de l'État, de l'UNESCO, qui dit que chaque État, partout au monde, doit allouer 1% du budget à la recherche scientifique. Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je vous remercie.
Okay, I think the issue was, it came also from Egypt in terms of the sovereignty of these 1%. But if you want to include that, this judicially allocate resources, blah, 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 as for recommendation of the UNESCO or something like that, in line with UNESCO's recommendation. Just like, I don't know how you had captured before, remember there are recommendations on education, the 10%, agriculture, etc. I think if we can word it in that format. Okay? Okay. Thank you, DRC. Sénégal.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. J'ai une observation au niveau du paragraphe 40, petit 2i, au niveau du renforcement des capacités nationales à accroître l'efficacité des dépenses publiques. On a dit notamment en réduisant les fuites, je pense qu'en anglais on parle de leakages. Bon, je préfère le mot en améliorant le ciblage. Et après, en veillant, réduisant les fuites, c'est un peu difficile à comprendre. C'est quoi les fuites de dépenses publiques? Je pense qu'on peut parler ici du ciblage des dépenses publiques. Merci.
Our DS wants to comment. Thank you.
Honorable delegates, yes, targeting is one important dimension of improving efficiency, but leakages are equally a major issue. Sometimes we have significant comparative advantages in many of our resources that do not require any incentives, 30-year tax holidays, all sorts of things. Those are, and yet in many countries we do that as part of our effort to try and attract investments. So I think leakages are one important dimension of the effort to improve revenues, collection and retention in our respective jurisdictions. So with your permission, I hope Senegal, with this, you will be comfortable with us adding, of course, targeting, but also retaining leakages. It's a major, major issue. Thank you.
I was going to propose that we make an addition, because I remember this was coming from our Rwanda colleague. When she talked about these issues, she talked of prioritization of budget expenditures, if I recall very well. So we might include that aspect in terms of prioritization of expenditures. Okay? Would that be okay for Senegal? It's okay?
Yes, it's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So we can do that. We were on page, we were on 11 or 10? 12. Okay. Thank you. Let's proceed, please. Okay, we have the Central Bank of Egypt online. Can we put them through, please?
Thank you so much, Chair. This is Osama Abdurrahman from the Central Bank of Egypt. And my intervention on page 12, it has to do with B, but Roman 3, which is at the very start of page 13. So yes. I think my colleague already made an intervention, but I just want to clarify something, and we need to be clear with Roman 3. It says that the ECA should support the African Union Commission in establishing an African credit rating system. And I think this statement, it has to be revisited, because already the issue of establishing an African credit rating system or agency, it was already taken into consideration by the ministers during the specialized technical committee, which was held last July in Nairobi. And the decision by the ministers was that the African peer review mechanism, which is affiliate to the African Union Commission, will do the establishment, and it will be through the private sector, and it will be through self-funding. And actually, there was another directive for the ECA by the ministers. And I can read the directive, Chair, if you allow me. This was the directive by the ministers in Nairobi. They requested the EPRM, the ECA, and the African Union Commission to collaborate with technical institutions on data dissemination and transparency standards in strengthening credit rating in Africa. This was the direction. But here it is said that the ECA will support the AUC in establishing. And my understanding of this is that now ECA will finance the establishment. So I need to be guided. And if you allow me, Chair, there will be a rendition of this statement. I will write through the chat. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. If we could have the draft so that we can quickly reword the language for Roman numeral 3. Thank you so much. Okay. So
just now, in 1 minute, Chair, I'm writing it on the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Bye. Let's move.
Chair, page 13, part F, report on the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for landlocked developing countries for the decade 2014 to 2024. We also had part G, Doha Programme of Action for the least developed countries, report on progress in implementation of priority areas in Africa. Details the presentation, the discussion, and the recommendations. That is page 13 and 14.
There was a mention of this landlocked versus, what was the terminology? Land linked. I'm learning new terminologies now. Do we want to include it here, or what's the pleasure of the meeting? Okay, I'm told this is the official language, but we can change official languages, isn't it? Countries can change official languages if they want. I'm told that this is the Unga language, and we can only change it. I'm told there's a meeting in Kigali, so maybe we can look out for that. Our delegate from Rwanda, if you could be on the lookout for this meeting in Kigali so that you can change the official language. Okay? Thank you. Let's move on.
Chair, page 14, Roman 7, the date, venue, and theme of the 57th session of the Economic Commission for Africa. We had a presentation and recommendations.
Any input? Is that Mali? It's Mali, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Sur la recommandation, sur la première partie, la première option, je n'ai pas de problème, mais sur... excusez-moi. Sur la première partie, la première recommandation, le point A, il n'y a pas de problème, mais sur le point B, je pense tel qu'elle est formulée, elle me paraît un peu dubitative parce que on dirait que ça ne s'impose pas à la Commission. Donc je voudrais qu'on reformule comme suit que la Commission devrait aborder lors de la 57e session les questions de numérisation et technologie ainsi que la sécurité alimentaire et la transformation énergétique. Parce que le fait de dire qu'il faudrait veiller à ce que, je ne sais pas qui va veiller, mais il faudrait que ça soit quelque chose d'impératif. Je vous remercie.
Okay, I think that's a good point because we were saying we are going for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area as proposing transfer, etc. And I thought we were saying the rest of the two other themes will be captured within that broader theme we have adopted. I think that's what we agreed. So can we, Rapporteur, we are together? Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mali. Are you okay with my comments?
J'ai bien entendu le commentaire, mais bon, on va le prendre comme ça, mais moi je souhaiterais quand même que ça soit quelque chose encore plus précis. Voilà, mais maintenons ça comme ça, espérant que le thème ne sera pas modifié ou remplacé. Les sous-thèmes, je vais dire.
Anna, come in, please.
Yeah, the agreement from the discussion is that the focus would be on advancing the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, taking into account the elements of food and security energies in terms of what are the regional solutions under the agreement that can resolve these challenges. That was the agreement, and we said that this will be captured in the revised, in the concept note that would be developed for this. So that was the essence of the discussion that we had summarized.
So, Rapporteur, can you capture the essence of the conversation? DRC?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Moi, je suis à la page 15. Les III, donc les trois I, c'est pour Doha, on dit une recommandation, aligner leur plan de développement, I4, dans le point 4, procéder à des examens de la mise en œuvre du programme d'action de Doha à l'initiative de pays concernés. Je suggère qu'on puisse mettre procéder à l'évaluation de la mise en œuvre du programme d'action de Doha à l'initiative de pays concernés. Parce que si c'est l'examen, peut-être qu'on examine pour qu'on puisse donner un avis sur ce programme. Mais si les États ont déjà conçu leur plan d'action, moi je pense que c'est pour venir faire l'évaluation.
Sorry, dear colleague, could you repeat? We were not catching the
Nous sommes à la version française, à la page 15. Il y a les recommandations sur... je ne sais pas si c'est chez moi, c'est la page 15. Hein. Attendez.
Which is 14 for English version. Roman 4, eh?
C'est la page 15 chez moi. C'est la version française. Il y a des recommandations, c'est le point 49. Il y a le point A, les membres de la CEA. Il y a le premier point, il y a le deuxième point, il y a le troisième point et il y a le quatrième point où on dit procéder à des examens de la mise en œuvre du programme d'action de Doha à l'initiative de pays concernés. Alors, je suggère qu'on puisse mettre procéder à l'évaluation en lieu et place des examens.
Okay, I get you. Thank you. Okay, let's conclude. Rapporteur.
Chair, we are at the end of the report. Roman 8 is on other matters. Roman 9, consideration and adoption of the report of the Committee of Experts and consideration of recommendations and draft resolutions. Roman 10, closing of the 42nd meeting of the Committee of Experts.
Colleagues, let me thank our rapporteur and your contributions to our deliberations as presented in our report. And thank you so much for... Mali, do you still want to... Mali?
Non, non. Je voulais dire, hier, je cru entendre dans les débats, on a parlé des questions de réglementation, notamment en ce qui concerne l'intelligence artificielle. Il y a aujourd'hui une nécessité impérieuse pour l'Afrique d'avoir une réglementation dans ce domaine. Je pense qu'hier, le représentant du secteur privé qui avait parlé avait effectivement posé la problématique, mais je n'ai pas vu une recommandation, sauf erreur de ma part, une recommandation dans ce sens.
Thank you. Good point. Good observation. So, Rapporteur, let's go through the resolutions one by one and solicit for comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We are now going to look at the draft resolutions. Consideration of recommendations and draft resolutions. There are 4 of them. We'll go one by one. Let's start with the draft resolution on the 2025 program plan and budget.
Now comments? Let's move on.
Draft resolution on the reorganization of the work of the Economic Commission for Africa.
Any takers? Okay, let's move on.
Draft resolution on strengthening tax cooperation for enhanced domestic resource mobilization.
Comments? Good, let's move on. We're doing very well.
Draft resolution on optimizing African tax regimes concerning information and communications technology for economic growth and job creation.
Comments? I know it's the dying minutes of the meeting of experts and it's becoming late, so let's move on. Let's soldier on, Rapporteur.
That marks the end of the resolutions, Chair.
Thank you so much. Let's so I'm guided that the report and the recommendations and the resolutions will be taken forward to the ministerial segment of our meetings, which start on Monday. Okay? Thank you. Okay. I think we have bureaucracies as well in these meetings, the issue of following structured formats for what we need to do. So I have to get used to those. So we are going to have Hanan make some remarks. Then I've been asked to close the meeting, but I'll be very brief. Thank you. Anand, thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Vumba, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, and our brilliant chair for the Bureau of the Committee of Experts. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as we conclude this meeting of the Committee of Experts of the 56th session of the African Conference of Ministers, we had very vibrant and dynamic 3 days of discussion, and I can confirm that really this session has been a success. It has gone beyond just exchanging ideas into developing actionable proposals. And we do hope that this provides a strong ground and informative material for the ministers, along with pivotal proposals on prioritizing global, regional, and national agendas. Throughout these deliberations, we have seen several perspectives emerging and showing really the diversities of voices and views that enrich our continent. Together, we have also explored a spectrum of instruments and mechanisms aiming at financing the transition to inclusive green economies in Africa. We have really looked into dissecting imperatives, weighing opportunities, and crafting policy options that resonate with our collective aspirations for meeting the two agendas, Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. I would like to just briefly review some of the main points of our deliberation, and I will try to be really as brief as possible. We've already talked about how the global growth is anticipated to decelerate, while Africa's growth is expected to increase this year and next one. And we've already talked about this rising debt burden on the continent and rising vulnerabilities. We have talked also about how climate change have been exacerbating the situation and shrinking fiscal space, and how it leads to a vicious circle with a lack of these investments leading to actually more cost of adjusting to climate, leading to higher financing. And we have also talked about opportunities and immense opportunities to take advantage of global shifts, including the transition towards renewable and the growing use of critical minerals in green industries. As we reflect on the profound challenges facing Africa today, I think we have really, our resounding message from this meeting has been that time for action is now. And we need to take concrete steps toward a paradigm shift in our development strategies to be more forward-looking. This means directing our efforts to more targeted interventions to advance our continent's social and economic development. In summary, this will hinge on three elements. First, addressing the issue of finance and investment. And here we need to attract more affordable and concessional finance to the continent through the reform of the global financial architecture. That will include, of course, the issues we talked about in terms of de-risking projects and attracting private sector investment. In our effort to attract these investments and create much needed fiscal space, we need to reduce the debt burden on African countries to enable them to actually allocate more resources to critical sectors ranging from healthcare, education, as well as climate action. It's imperative here to amplify the African voice and representation and utilize the opportunity with the African Union G20 seat to really move from being rule takers to rule makers and engage in that process to advance that agenda. And another very important element is the need to bolster international cooperation on taxation to curb illicit financial flows. And I cannot overstate the necessity of reforming the global debt resolution mechanism, to have one that works better, to including standstill upon application, expanding to middle income countries, and establishing a functioning comparability of treatment formula. Second, at a regional level, we must transform potential and ideas into tangible actions through concrete projects that leverage on our advantages. We must shift also to our efforts to foster more of the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. And we need to continue to foster the creation of regional value chains in critical sectors like minerals and electrical vehicles, food energy systems, and technology. This really will be key, and also to leverage emerging regional initiatives like the Great Blue Wall in order to have coordinated and large-scale response to environmental challenges while generating benefits for local communities. Our discussions at the regional level also highlighted the need for innovative financing instruments, and ECA remains committed to supporting countries in this regard. We will work on supporting countries to also develop regional carbon markets, strengthen carbon market integrity, and enhance and increase the carbon price to a fair one. We will also, last but not least, we need to also work on at the national level to ensure that we have the required enabling environment and adequate policy and regulatory frameworks. Policymakers hold the key here to creating that environment, which also will include optimizing both public revenue and spending, streamlining regulatory obstacles, and enhancing policy and regulatory certainty. As we strive to attract investments and create much needed fiscal space, it's really crucial to prioritize curbing illicit financial flows, as we have been talking about this. And this also will require to avail more fiscal space. Part of what is needed and part of what we have discussed is the need for more expenditure efficiency. We need to make sure that we are getting the highest return for each dollar or each amount that we are spending. Moreover, we need to deepen domestic resource mobilization through doubling efforts to broaden our tax base, ensuring more progressive tax system, and increasing utilization of digitalization and e-tax filing, and considering the efficiency of the tax exemptions that we currently have. It's really about assessing what is the optimal taxation and where we do have leakages or inefficiencies. Finally, it's crucial that our efforts trickle down to all levels to foster ownership. And we need to leverage our most important asset, as we have discussed, which is human capital, to really harness this huge potential of our youth and the fact that the continent is the youngest region and only getting younger. This will involve empowering and equipping our youth with crucial skills and education to shape our shared future, and the need to also focus on issues of innovation. With that said, we are counting on you, honorable delegates, to brief your ministers so that they can discuss and advance our agendas in the next ministerial segment. Before I conclude, I would like to encourage all participants to visit exhibitions outside, including ECA knowledge exhibition. You can engage with our dedicated individuals who serve our member states, discussing success stories, challenges, and areas for partnerships. Finally, last but not least, I would like to reiterate my deep gratitude and thanks to the government of Zimbabwe for graciously hosting us, and to all the esteemed delegates for their active participation in this crucial discussion. It has been really wonderful to enjoy all these very insightful and engaging discussions and enjoy wonderful hospitality by our hosts. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, let us persist in our collective efforts to achieve tangible actions with what we have and continue to advocate for more in pursuit of development in our beloved Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Good evening, colleagues. I've been asked to close our meeting, but you know, I don't like bureaucracy, but I'll do as requested. So I'll be very, very brief. I think for me as chair, I want to thank you so much, all the delegates, for your support in the conduct of these meetings. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I hope you enjoyed yourself for the past 3 days, where we're tackling challenges or issues for our continent. And I'm hoping that we can also move towards action-oriented approaches to what we do, and focusing on delivery, the measurement of what we are trying to do, how do we measure success, etc. We've discussed those. We need to think beyond this conference. What are we delivering for our people, for those who look after us, to provide the services, education, health, etc., etc. So I'm delighted that we managed to go through this process, and I think we've got a common understanding on the recommendations, and I'm delighted we've managed to converge very quickly. So for me, let me thank from the bottom of my heart the team from Zimbabwe and UNECA who assisted, who worked diligently to put this whole campus together, the logistics, etc., etc. I'm very thankful and grateful even for the guidance from the UNECA team. You gave us so much guidance. We started late in December, but thank you so much. I'd like to. And then also let me thank those behind the scenes, the service providers. We had a mammoth task of engaging them, going through tenders in short notice, etc. Thank you so much, interpreters, ICT, everything. Thank you so much for a job well done. If I forget someone, sorry. It's just that I am rushing through so that we go for dinner. So I'm looking forward to the next steps, the next approaches we are going to develop, and to the next meetings, etc. But I would like us to also look at the way we can transform the way we do business so that we are more efficient and time conscious, especially on this report. I think let's find ways of making sure that we assist the rapporteurs, etc., so that we don't have long breaks before we get the report. So let's try and work together on that so that we are looking at that issue. But otherwise, thank you so much, the delegates, for coming. I know you faced some challenges getting to Harare because of the issues of connectivity affecting Africa. I apologize for those who spent 2 nights trying to get to here, but I can assure you, you can compensate that through visiting the Victoria Falls. I'm sure you can do that. And I would like to urge you all to make sure that over this weekend, you get to see the wildlife, you get to see the Victoria Falls and the whole tourism facilities we have in this beautiful town of Victoria Falls. I hope you'll be adventurous and get to see our majestic Victoria Falls and what it brings. So with those words, let me just say I wish you all the best as we proceed with the ministers' conference on Monday and Tuesday, and also there are some activities and presentations over the weekend I hope we can attend. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I've been asked to say that the conference services received inquiries from many delegates about post-business, after-business activities, leisure activities. There is an information kiosk outside. They have a whole range of activities lined up for you. So please feel free to go in there, see what they have on offer, and you are absolutely free to book whatever activities you would like to engage in. They will organize it for you. They'll organize transportation. Some of it may be at some cost, but they are there. The facility exists just as a response to some of the questions that you've put up to our conference service colleagues. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. Colleagues, one more announcement, please. Colleagues, bear with us. One more announcement. I've just been reminded that the government of Zimbabwe has very generously offered each of you in the room a souvenir, and as you walk out, please collect your souvenir out at the doors. So there's a kiosk out there, and the government of Zimbabwe has very generously offered each of you a souvenir for your presence here tonight over the past 3 days. So thank you very much.